Hi. Earlier on, I mentioned my experience in outsourcing. That's actually where I got to know a lot about the contact center world through my experience in working at some of the biggest outsourcers in the world. So I'm going to share with you some tips based on my knowledge, my experience, and what I've seen over the past few years. To help us understand the value of outsourcing to our business, one of the first things we have to do is to consider why we want to outsource. Is it because running a contact center or customer service operation or even a help desk is not our core business? And that applies to a lot of organizations where you may be, for example, in the manufacturing sector, and running a customer service center isn't your core business because you're in the manufacturing business. So it's worth trying to understand why you're trying to outsource in the first place. Sometimes it's because you just don't have the latest technology out there. You don't have the funds or the resources to be able to invest in technology. Sometimes it's because you're looking for other practices to learn from others. It could be you need to upscale resources very rapidly, and this is another reason for outsourcing. Sometimes organizations use it for disaster recovery, or if they know they're going to do a marketing campaign. It could be cost is an issue. Somebody looks at the bottom line and says, you know what, investing in our own customer service center is not cost efficient. Let's look at alternatives. And that could be because maybe your existing operation might be underutilized. And there's also a question about people skills and language skills and lots of other factors that bear into it. You know, are you really good at running an internal operation, or should you consider outsourcing? So the best place to start is, once you've identified some of the reasons why you think it's worth outsourcing, do a cost benefit analysis. Look at what it really costs for you to manage this internally versus what it's going to cost for you to manage externally. And you may not know the external costs until you do some further analysis, but make sure you understand why you're doing it and why you want to, what it's going to mean to your company, and sell the idea internally as well, because you don't want to get any negative thoughts from internally when you say, hey, we're going to look at outsourcing. It's got to be a positive thing, because it could potentially have dramatic positive impacts on your business. Now we're going to start off by looking at how you go and find outsourcers. When we developed Contact Center World, we said there's going to be lots of information on outsourcing. We have an outsourcing channel or an outsourcing group. We also have lots of vendors in our directory, outsourcers, that you can go and research. And every company in the industry should have a page on Contact Center World, just like a company Facebook page. Every organization out there who provides outsourcing should have a company page. A really good thing to do is just to go onto Contact Center World. If you've identified some companies, just see what their profile is like on our website. Because we've been doing this for over 20 years, we have a wealth of information about outsourcers and who's out there. And if you feel that there's very little information on the company, that's probably a good indication of how active they are or how inactive they are in the contact center world. So bear that in mind. Use the internet to do your initial searches. You can also work with consultants. And one of the things to bear in mind is with consultants is really understand what the consultant is doing for you. What are they, who is also paying for their services? Now, I used to be a consultant, and one of the things consultants sometimes do is they work in partnership with outsourcers, and outsourcers pay them commission. So ask your consultant who is paying for the service. If you're paying and they're also getting commission, maybe reevaluate the relationship and look for a better pricing model where maybe the consultant gets paid by the outsourcer and they provide a free service to you. Just like the way that you often might use things like travel agencies and other agencies where they're getting paid a commission. So once you've identified potentially some outsourcers, what you want to do is to whittle it down to maybe 5 or 6 on a preliminary shortlist, and send them all a request for proposal. Now in that request for proposal, you want to outline some of the ideas and some of the things you're trying to achieve, and also what you're looking for in return. Ask them for lots of information that will help you understand what they do and how they do it. And if you send the RFP in a format that makes it easy for them to complete, then look for how they're completing it, how quickly they're getting back to you, and also what level of information they're providing. What I've learned over the years is that companies who provide very little information, or they miss out answers, are probably the ones to avoid, because there's a reason why they're providing little information, or they're missing certain answers to help you identify whether they're good or not. So if you get an incomplete RFP, best thing to do is just to move on, go back to somebody else who does complete it. Once you've done that, what you want to do is ideally shortlist it down to maybe 3 to 5 organizations maximum. You don't want to have a shortlist of 10 companies. It's not a shortlist. Once you've got your shortlist down to 3 or 5, that's when you start looking at more information. And going back to the initial response, look at how they responded and go back with more detailed questions to understand what they're actually doing. A good thing to do as well is, when you're getting these responses, look at who's filling them in. Is it a team of people, or is it one person? If it's one person and it's a salesperson, then obviously they're trying to sell to you, and they might give you the answers that a salesperson would typically give. If it's operational folks involved in the process, then maybe you're getting a more reasonable understanding of what you're going to be expecting. What I would then suggest is consider some site visits. Now, this can be challenging, especially where you're working across international boundaries and you're looking at maybe appointing an outsourcer in a different part of the world. However, it's a really, really crucial thing to do. You don't want to just appoint an outsourcer and then go and visit them and find out that actually it's not what you expected. We've all had experience of that. If you go into an outsourcing organization and you start looking around, you get a really good feel for the culture and what value you're going to get. So it's really, really important that you do site visits. And when you do a site visit, it's important to meet everybody. Don't just go in and meet the managing director or the CEO or the president of the company and the salesperson. You want to make a point of actually saying in advance of the site visit, hey, I want to come along and meet everybody. I want to meet some operational people. I want to meet my potential account managers. I also want to meet some of the call center agents and sit down and listen to what they're doing and listen into some calls so I get a good idea. If the outsourcer doesn't want to do that and they say, well, just come and meet with us and the sales manager or the sales director, and the CEO comes and says hello, then that's a good indication that maybe they're trying to hide something from you. Not in all cases, but I would be very wary if an organization tries to restrict you at the early stages. Now, they may have confidentiality agreements with organizations that might say, hey, you can't go and talk to these agents, or you can't do this, but there's always going to be people in the company you can go and meet. There's always going to be operational managers. There's always going to be agents you can go and talk to. Now, moving on, when you get your proposals and you're starting to go into more detail, compare the pricing models. What you want to do is to make sure that you're not picking the cheapest or the most expensive. You're going to find a range of pricing, and that range will also differ depending on what you're asking them to do and what they feel they have to do in return to deliver the service you want. So, it's really important that when you look at pricing, maybe set expectations. If you're looking to pay for call or per email or per chat, tell them in advance that our preferred option is to pay per call, per email, per chat. That way, when you get your proposals, you know what you're looking at and you can understand all the different proposals you're getting back. I mentioned earlier looking at the account management team. This is really, really important because these are the folks who are going to be managing your campaign, your project on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones who are going to be your internal champions at the outsourcer. And if you don't meet them, then you really don't know what to expect from a day-to-day operational perspective. I've been running events now for 15 years, and I always like to go and meet the account manager who's going to be running my event for me. And that's only over a 4 or 5 day period. When you're looking at outsourcing, you're not looking at 4 or 5 days, you're looking at weeks, months, sometimes years. So it's really important that you meet the account management team as early as possible before you appoint an outsourcer, because this will give you a good indication, can I work with this person? And you need to put them in the same sort of vein as if, for example, you're employing them full-time to work in your company. Are they somebody that you would easily get on well with? They're open to suggestions, they're open to giving ideas as well, and somebody that you think you can work with. If an outsourcer says, well, we don't know who we're going to appoint yet as an account manager, be cautious. I'm not saying don't work with them, but be very careful, because you don't want to sign a contract, go meet your account manager and realize that there's somebody you just cannot get on with, because that is going to end in a disaster. If you're going to be looking at outbound campaigns, and that's your primary reason for looking at an outsourcer, because you want to run an outbound campaign, make sure you do a thorough test with them first. That could include things like getting their agents to help you come up with a script. Don't just give them a script and say, here we go guys, this is what we'd like you to do. Ask the agents who are going to be involved on what they think and what they would put together, how to make it more conversational. Remember, you're buying their expertise. So consider a test campaign, especially for outbound. And even on inbound, if you're going to be working with an organization on inbound calls, inbound chats, talk to the agents and find out what they would suggest in terms of scripts. You may have legal obligations that you have to say certain things and do certain things, but it's always good to ask the experts, and those are the frontline professionals who are going to be taking or making phone calls and dealing with chats and other interactions. So get their expertise. But whatever you do, don't go into an outsourcer with a big outbound campaign for 300 people for 3 months and then expect amazing results at the end. What you want to do is work with a small pilot so that you can try something, see how it goes, and then tweak it and then fine tune it. And you always want to do that, whether you're doing that inbound or outbound. You always want to look at perhaps a pilot where you can test out the viability of what you're doing and make sure it's going to work. Now, moving on, you've identified some potential outsourcing partners. What you want to do is to get some references. And those just aren't written references. You want to ask for people you can talk to on the phone. And this is when you want to ask those references some really tough questions. Ask for examples of where the outsourcers exceeded your expectations. Ask for examples where they've failed to meet your expectations. Ask how they are when you have disputes or issues. Ask how they are when you want to ramp up or need to reduce the amount of traffic you're giving them. So you want to be very, very specific in references when you're talking to them to get some really good data back from them. Don't just say, oh, talk to a reference site and that organization and that person says, oh yeah, they're really good to work with. Dig deeper, because you're going to be likely embarking on a very long-term project. It's not a simple buy and sell something. You want to make sure they're going to be looking after you for a very long time. I also want to mention this point. If you've got your short list of 3 or 5 organizations, you've done your site visits, you've looked at references, you've met everybody you need to, and you are still not 100% happy, don't just pick one of those 3 or 5 companies. Keep on looking. You never want to accept second best. Remember, this is your business, your organization, and your own reputation at stake. If you're the one appointing the outsourcing partner, you want to make sure it's going to look good for you and your company. So don't accept second best. Keep on looking if you need to. Now we're going to talk about some operational things that you should do when you're working with an outsourcer. You've appointed them, you're working with them. Here are some things that you want to do on a regular basis. You want to make a point of visiting the agency, the outsourcing company regularly, and you want to make sure that you're getting time with the agents as well. It could be sitting with them, listening to phone calls so you understand exactly what's going on. It could also be listening to calls remotely. Some agencies allow you to do that, to dial in and listen in to real-time calls. But what you also want to do is just sit down with these agents regularly and just have a fireside chat with them, a coffee, and ask them how it's all going, any suggestions they've got. The agents who work in an outsourced contact center, in fact any contact center, are often a fountain of knowledge when it comes up with ideas to make things better. If you just sit down with the operational management team or the sales team or your account management team and look for ideas and feedback, you're only going to get some of what you really need. It's really valuable to work with an outsourcing partner who will allow you to go and sit with agents regularly, maybe just take them off the phone for half an hour just for a quick coffee as a group to discuss how it's all going, what they think of the campaign, what they think of the organization, your organization that is, what other things might help them do their job better, what they think of the systems they're using. Get regular feedback. And we would also encourage you to ask the agency to use tools like What Drives Me Crazy at Work or Top Place to Work, both available from Contact Center World. These great tools actually give you employee engagement feedback, but they also will give you feedback on what is driving the agents crazy when they're at work, what little things are kind of frustrating them. And that does ultimately affect the overall performance you're getting. I would also suggest that you get involved in training. Don't just leave it to the outsourcing partner to do all the training. If you've got new products, new services, go there, sit down with the team, help get involved in training. Don't just be an invisible person who the team doesn't even know who you are when you walk in. You want to be the person that they know and they feel, this is who I'm working for. Even though they're working for an outsourcing company, you want your agents on the calls and dealing with chats to actually feel that they're working for you, because they're going to want to impress you. So always get involved in training. Another tip is to look for things that you can do to help motivate agents. I worked on some amazing campaigns in my years when I was working in the outsourcing field. And I had some clients who were absolutely brilliant. They would actually offer incentives or rewards to the agents. And what that meant is that the agents actually felt that they are more responsible and more accountable to the client, and they delivered a better service. So work with your outsourcing partner and look for things that you can do together to motivate your agents. It might be giveaways that you can sponsor, or it might be other activities like taking agents away or having the Best Agent of the Year award, things that you want to do to help motivate them. When you're working with an outsourcer, don't ever be afraid to ask for help. An outsourcer, by virtue of their business, should be a specialist. They are the experts. So if you've got a particular challenge, then ask the outsourcer. Your immediate account management team may not have the answer for you, but if they're providing services to many other organizations, they probably have access to lots of ideas and information on what else that you can do to help answer some of the challenges that you may be facing. So don't ever be afraid to ask for help. It doesn't mean to say that you're going to buy something from them, but you just want some help and advice. This is an important one. Treat staff the same way as if they were working for you. So if I can give you a couple of examples, if you run internal programs, motivation, engagement programs for your staff in your own office, and you also use an outsourcing partner, maybe look at trying to transfer some of those same incentives, rewards to the outsourcer so that they feel that they're part of your organization. Likewise, you know what it's like in an organization. If the managing director or the president sometimes gets a complaint, they can jump up and down and say, hey, the outsourcing firm, they're not doing good service, check into it. What you want to do is temper your thoughts and your feelings. Don't actually just go barging into the outsourcer and saying, hey guys, we've got some major issues. Look at it as if it was in your own organization and talk to the outsourcer and give them some feedback, but don't get mad, don't get frustrated, unless this is an ongoing problem that you seem to be having, in which case then, yeah, you have a justifiable reason. But don't get mad, don't get frustrated, work with the outsourcer, give them some feedback, and you know that the one complaint that went up to the president or the CEO is unlikely to be indicative of the way that you guys are running your outsourced services. So look at it in isolation, just as you would an internal problem if it was your own company, and get people together, find out what's going on, but don't don't be overly critical of the outsourcer just on one or two complaints from your president, your CEO. Also, on that point, it's really important that you don't get involved in politics in the outsourcer. In every organization, there's always some politics. Don't get involved in their politics. Let them run their business. You run your business and work with the account management team and the operational team as and when necessary. When you're working with the outsourcer, make sure that you have a full list of every single price, everything that they possibly could charge you before you sign for an agreement, That's really, really important, because sometimes there are hidden costs. And then when you start getting faxes coming through or emails, or they're spending time on your campaign and you get an invoice and it's got some things that you didn't even think about, and those are extortionately high prices, then that causes concern, frustration and challenges for everybody. So in the initial stages, when you're looking at outsourcers, it's always good to actually ask them at the outset, hey, can I just see what are all the things that possibly you could charge us for? Not today, not just what we've asked for today, but think of all the other things you do for other clients. If it's sending information out by post, if it's doing mailings for us, if it's dealing with chats, if it's dealing with programming, if you're dealing with creative design, give us your full pricing list and let us know how you charge for all of that, just so that you understand what you're letting yourself in for. Okay. Make sure you have regular reviews with your outsourcing partner. It's really important that you spend time with your outsourcing team on a regular basis. You talk to them, you work with them, you look at things that you can improve on, and you're also reviewing processes, you're also reviewing performance, and you're having those discussions on a regular basis. So that would include also not just the operational team and the account management team, but also make sure you get time with the agents, the frontline professionals who are dealing with all your customers. Be open to ideas from the outsourcer. Actively encourage the outsourcer to come back to you with ideas on what else you can do differently to improve your business. Tell them if you're trying to generate revenue and say, hey, can you come up with some ideas on how we can make some revenue with what we're doing? If you're looking to improve service, or you're looking to cross-sell, or whatever it might be, maybe you're looking for retention ideas, retention strategies, ask your outsourcer continuously for ideas and be open to them. Remember, they're providing this service to many organizations, so there's going to be people in their organization who have done this, been there, worn a t-shirt and can share their knowledge. When it comes to the agreement that you have with your outsourcing partner, there's a couple of things to consider. One of them is that there should be different components of the agreement. There should be like the working operational performance metrics and practices, and there should be the legal stuff. What you want to do is the legal stuff, you really don't want to have to dig out at any stage. It's the sort of stuff that you put in the bottom of the drawer, and your operational performance metrics is something that you want to just work with on a regular basis with your account management team. So if you ever get to a stage of having to dig out the legal documents, then you're probably in some trouble with the outsourcer, and that's the time to either clear the path for a change in outsourcing partner, or you both agree that we're going to revisit everything and make it work. But it's kind of like an employment contract. You want to make sure that you don't ever need to dig out the contract unless there is an issue. And then if there is an issue, there's certain escalation clauses that will make it easy for you and your outsourcing partner to, if you need to, part company amicably. Always make sure you do have a formal agreement as well with the outsourcing partner. Don't just sign an order to say you're going to buy certain amounts of calls or hours from them. Make sure you have a formal agreement that covers everything and also indicates to you guys what's going to happen if there's some issues or if there's any challenges. And likewise, you know, put some consideration into the people who are working on your program as well. Maybe it's worth considering in that agreement that if the personnel change, there's an opportunity for you to review without penalty the whole program and see whether it's still a viable option for you to maintain it with the outsourcer. You can also consider including into the agreement some of the things that you might want to do with the outsourcing partner. For example, if you want to be involved in the selection process, include that in the agreement, selection process of their staff. If you want to meet with them regularly or just have an open door policy, make sure it's in there and be very clear what you actually mean by open door policy. So it's not just literally you can turn up anytime, day or night, but maybe during specific working hours you have the opportunity to turn up unannounced and have an opportunity to sit down with the team handling your calls or emails, your chats, etc. A very important part of working with any outsourcing partner, whether it's for calls or emails, chats, or any kind of business, is that you actually review plans regularly. Build this into an agreement that maybe you're going to review costs on an annual basis, or maybe you're going to review service standards every 6 months. Maybe the service standards also would change depending on the type of activity. So you might agree one set of service standards, but if, for example, you suddenly give them a lot more business and they have to ramp up, then maybe there's also some provision in the contract or the agreement that suggests that there was a chance to review service standards based on traffic and volumes. So just treat any agreement as you would with an internal agreement between your company departments, where you have performance and service standards. Don't just let things go and you never sit down and have a formal review. Just like an employee, you want to do it at least once a year, if not more regularly. A few final thoughts. Once you've started to outsource, it's always worth considering, are you doing the right thing? You might determine that at some point in time you want to bring things back in-house. It's always worth reviewing your own plans and just on a regular basis, just sit down and say, are we doing the right things? Should we still consider keeping everything with an outsourcer? Do we bring some of it back in? Make sure you have just a regular review, maybe once every 6 months or a year, just to review to see how things are progressing. I know you're still adopting the right strategy. Also, the other thing to do is listen to your customers. If your customers are really happy with the service they're now getting and it's a big difference from what it used to be, then make sure that you continue on with outsourcing. If, on the other hand, you're hearing lots of complaints because the outsourcing firm, the staff just don't know enough about the products or services, or it's creating a lot more work for you and people are complaining, then it's a good time to just review how things are going and decide whether outsourcing is still right for you. But make sure you have a regular review. And is it worth at some point bringing it in-house, or do we just keep it outsourced? Or maybe you have a hybrid model where some calls are handled internally, the rest are outsourced. The final thing I want to just say to everybody, if you're using an outsourcing partner today, it's always worth having a backup plan. And that backup plan could be another outsourcing company who maybe you've just kept your eye on and you know that they're in the background. Always make sure your knowledge and understanding of the outsourcers out there is up to date, so that if something happens, maybe your current outsourcing partner gets acquired or they go out of business, you always want to have a backup plan so that if you need to, you can shift to a new partner as quickly as possible with as minimal disruption as possible. So just keep your eyes open, keep an eye on what's out there, keep your ear to the ground, look at who the movers and shakers are in the industry, and that way you're always going to be ahead of the game because you always have a backup plan should the need arise.